Hey, what's up? It's your boy Elf7. Today I got a very special guest on. I met him on Twitter, and he's actually an activist working with Assange, like on Assange related topics. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
what's lately? Some stuff has happened with Assange. What's going on with that?
Well, first, let me introduce myself. My name's Steve Poikonen. I co-host the Free Assange Vigil series. Happens twice a week now on Tuesday evenings and Saturday afternoons. I also host a show called Slow News Day, which you can find on YouTube and the Rockfin and D Live. And just this past week, a superseding indictment came down from the Department of Justice that expands the scope of the it doesn't add any new charges. It just expands the scope of the charges that have to deal with the cyber crimes part of Julian Assange's 18 charge indictment, all of which is basically heralding the death of investigative journalism. So that's really why it's really why I'm here today, but also really why everyone should be concerned about this. Because if we don't have investigative journalism, all we have are what think tanks and the government tells us, and what the stenographers and legacy or establishment media repeat without question.
Yeah, and it's happening on so many fronts, right? It's not just happening. I think recently Tulsi Gabbard lost her lawsuit to Google because Google said we're a private company. We can shape the message any way we want. That doesn't seem very, they actually won that lawsuit, I believe, right?
Well, and that begs the question: is Google really a private company? Because they are intertwined uh, clearly with not just the U.S. government but world governments. Google has positioned themselves as sort of an invested third party
Yeah.
or intermediary between the government and the people at large. So as to what, yes, Google has, shareholders and they have a board, and they are registered as a private company. But I think it's about time we start asking the question whether or not they are really a private company.
Okay. So recently, you may have heard of Andrew Yang, right? And he
Oh
started
yeah.
some new policy where he's trying to now get citizens paid for their data. That's what his words are, right? That's what his marketing. He's saying, we're trying to get you paid for your data, right? But he says the words data and he doesn't say the word privacy. And that seems like a strange turn for me. That have you ever seen this attempt to reframe the whole Assange thing from you know um, right to know information, right, and then also right to privacy, like protect these sources, right, on the internet. Um, there's been so many different attacks. Have you seen the people other attempts to try to reframe or redefine what this fight is about?
Oh, of course. And look, you get that from every corner of the interweb and every single conceivable political ideology. So let me say unequivocally right now what this is about and what Action for Assange promotes, and that is privacy in the digital space for you and me and everybody, private citizens, and transparency for the powerful. Because without that transparency, with a government operating in the dark and in the shadows, who knows what they're doing in our name and with our money?
Yeah.
So I really would like to see more people take up the cause of digital privacy rights. I think that, and we just on the Free Assange Vigil earlier day, we were speaking with a longtime anon,
Okay.
um, who goes by the name Mark Lubers. And he reiterated the original hacker credo that data wants to be free.
Okay.
It does. It wants to be out into the public space. And there are things that the public definitely deserves to know, like whether or not their government is committing war crimes. And that's ultimately what WikiLeaks was able to provide us with, was primary source documentation that war crimes were being committed. And it was up to us to interpret that data. It wasn't being spun to us, or that information. It wasn't, nobody was telling us what to think about it. It was
Right.
our own reaction and our ability to put two and two together that has been really removed from us
Okay.
in media in general.
I also want to ask, we've seen that this activity from Assange has been going on for some time. He's been like in, in the consulate, like hanging out. Now he's like, I believe he's in Britain, right? Or he's like in, England, right?
So
So,
let's break
like,
that down a little bit.
why do you think that suddenly, right, like things are happening? Did something provoke a response, or are they trying to protect something? Why is all of a sudden Assange being hit with new charges?
That's a good question, and let's break down what you just said. You said Julian Assange was hanging out in the embassy. That's factually incorrect. What he did was he applied for asylum when the Ecuadorian embassy and was granted it because he was being targeted by a hostile state power. Not because he was evading an investigation, not because he was hiding from anyone, but because he was a target. Embassies don't grant asylum willy nilly. You know what I mean? Um, so the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention found that he was being arbitrarily detained in the Ecuadorian embassy. He was there for 7.5 years before he was trafficked out of it after the IMF paid for his body with a $4.2 billion loan to Ecuador. And now he is being held in solitary confinement 23 and a half hours a day in the Guantanamo Bay of the United Kingdom, which is Her Majesty's prison, Belmarsh. He has been there for almost 440 days. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, visited him with two doctors. They left that meeting declaring that Assange has been psychologically tortured for a number of years. And then to your, so that's where that is.
Yeah.
If you could you repeat the last part, because when I get going on this I kind of
No,
get sidetracked.
it's okay. So the thing is that right now Yang has like some kind of like a new thing he's marketing that's called like get people paid for their data, right? But the thing is that it's not really so much data. There is some data actually being, but a lot of this has to do with privacy, right? Like, do we have a lot of people? Actually, I guess a lot of people are just signing on the dotted line and giving away their privacy, and a lot of people are seeing this kind of stuff. And well, so you can see like there's a lot of movement on a lot of different fronts by companies themselves, by politicians, to try to reframe or redefine what this fight is, right? What are some of the
Yeah.
more popular ways that these you know attempts to reframe this whole Assange situation? Besides the factual, thanks for clearing that up. I am aware of some of those things, but I just put it in a real loose way. But thanks for being
Yeah.
specific. But
Yeah.
as in terms of the like the overall framework of is it privacy? Is it really
Yeah.
protecting investigative journalism? What are the core aspects of the Assange movement here?
So, and real quick, let me touch on what you did ask. The second part of your question a minute ago. Why there's been movement on this? It's because organizations like Action for Assange have been successful in getting this information out to people who aren't just grassroots activists. There's an organization called Doctors for Assange, who was co-founded by a wonderful, wonderful human being and friend of our show, Dr. Lissa K. Johnson. We've got medical professionals from all over the planet who have stepped up, signed letters, provided information saying the UK must release Julian Assange, compassionate release of a remand prisoner, because this is the thing. Julian Assange is in the Guantanamo Bay of the United Kingdom, not being charged with anything yet. He's on remand. Their excuse is, well, we can't let him out because we haven't charged him with anything. Try and wrap your head around that sort of logic. So because there's been a big push, again, by activists, but not just activists, the International Barristers Association, lawyers from all over the planet, doctors, journalists have stepped forward to say this man is being arbitrarily detained. He needs to be released. So there's been that push,
So
and
what are
the
the
reaction.
right?
The
So
reaction
yeah.
is Sorry, just let me finish the thought, and then we'll get to that. The reaction by the Trump Justice Department has been okay. Well, everybody knows this is a political persecution, so we've got to reframe it as cyber terrorism and cyber crimes, and that's why there's an expansion in this superseding indictment that relates specifically to cyber act online activity, with all kinds of suppositions and two very unreliable witnesses, that being the two FBI assets, Sigur Thordarson, goes by the Siggy, who went by the handle Teenager, and Sabu, Hector Monsignor, who was the snitch who rolled up and orchestrated Lulzsec in 2011 and 2012.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, man.
And if you want to know the history of that, I'm happy to break that down at a later point in the show. But I did roll over what you were saying, so please tell me what
so maybe they felt like they were trying to, maybe they're just at a stage where they think they can break him mentally, or maybe some political things going on with the election or this COVID thing where for some reason now are they trying to just, maybe everybody paying attention to COVID and they're just trying to like shuttle this through and people aren't paying attention. Or what do you think is like the cause for the timing of it, or is there anything else that might become that's interesting, which they might want to do this before to maybe try to silence certain reporters or threaten them in some way?
Absolutely. Well, look, ever since people took the streets after George Floyd was murdered, there's been an open war on journalists. Over 400 journalists have been arrested, shot at, tear gassed, and one of the principal reasons for why law enforcement gets to target journalists in this way now is because Julian Assange is in prison. In terms of why the timing, back in March, a 10-year-long grand jury investigating WikiLeaks was dismissed. This culminated in the liberation of Chelsea Manning from jail, and it also Jeremy Hammond was no longer being held in contempt of the grand jury, so he was transferred out of the prison in Arlington, Virginia, where both Chelsea Manning and Jeremy Hammond were housed, where Action Assange went and held a protest at when we were there in February. He is in minimum security in Oklahoma, and his time is winding down. He will be a free citizen soon. But the end of that grand jury prompted them to launch a second brand new grand jury, and I want to draw the audience into this. The grand jury process is completely illegitimate. In this particular grand jury, there were only prosecutors and 4 impaneled jurists. No judge, no one to present a second side. So it was held, these proceedings were held in the dark, they weren't made public, and at the end of this grand jury process, they released a superseding indictment, which just builds on the existing one. The time for them to add new charges had already expired, so they had to broaden the scope of what they had already issued.
I think this is very easy for people to believe, because if you that documentary about Jeffrey Epstein, and you could see like how the justice system is not very fair, and certain people are allowed to get away with things and they unfairly persecute other people. Like in this case, both stories sound eerily familiar in terms of the way things are just pushed through, and they try to not consult with anybody. Yeah, it's very, very strange.
Yeah, there's no daylight being shed on it, and honestly, I mean, this is a decade long or more. How do I want to put this? Can I swear on your show?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, because I may. I just, I feel like I should ask. But the State Department has been working to just put away Julian Assange ever since 2007. There's been an active pursuit of him since 2009. We have document upon document upon document, leaked emails, and especially in the Stratfor hacks of both public and private sector intelligence agencies trying to honey trap Julian Assange, trying to assassinate him in the Ecuadorian embassy. The revelations by El País, a Spanish outlet, and the Gray Zone um, recently about the Spanish security firm UC Global that was at the provided security for the embassy, about them being ordered to steal a diaper if they could and run DNA tests on it to see if a child was something they could hang over Julian Assange's head
You know,
or
actually,
his
yeah.
partner's head.
Just so you know, the U.S. government, you can watch shows about this on YouTube. When the president goes overseas, they will actually collect his feces, so there's no DNA left in those countries because, that's standard actual operating procedure amongst these agencies. You could look it up.
Can you imagine
They
being
collect
the
all
agent
the
that
feces.
gets to draw the short straw of poo collector?
Hey, it's a job. I'm sure they're very well
It's a
compensated.
job.
They're in their own dirty little business over there. We heard about like the brothels going on in Colombia and stuff like that. It's not a good scene. But that's very interesting. Some of the things that you mentioned right now, and I just want to actually ask your perspective, right? So the thing is that Trump, right, like early on in his career, like early on in the race in 2016, like he was benefiting from some of the stuff that was coming out, and it seemed like he would be for Assange. But then all of a sudden, right, like not all of a sudden, but he never really came through with it. And in fact, it seems like now he's going after Assange. Are there any like theories as to like who changed his mind or what happened there?
Nobody changed his mind. Donald Trump stated publicly in 2012 that Julian Assange should be assassinated.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
The Donald Trump is a showman and a con man and a good one. He's a performer. My fucking God, he was a reality TV star prior to being president of the United States. Like, he knows how to work and manipulate a crowd. And when he was on stage as candidate Trump saying, "We love the WikiLeaks, we need more WikiLeaks," he was working with a couple of people that had signed on to his campaign, Rich Grinnell and Michael Flynn Jr. or Michael Flynn
Mm-hmm.
Sr., as to set up back channels with an Ecuadorian, I guess, dissenter of the Rafael Correa administration, a guy named Lenin Moreno, who, with the help of the United States, was elected president in 2017, working on back channeling with them. And Sheldon Adelson was a huge part of this, using his casinos as a staging ground for U.S. intelligence and Ecuadorian intelligence to basically get Julian Assange. So while Trump was on stage saying we love WikiLeaks, he was behind the scenes working on a way to make sure that Julian Assange got nailed. So, amount of showmanship there is through the roof. But the reality of the situation is Donald Trump is scared shitless of Julian Assange, and he is petrified of WikiLeaks, and he is would do anything to kill investigative journalism. And this is manifested in the 17 charges under the Espionage Act of 1917, and then these additional charges that under the rubric of cyber crimes, which is 100% how every journalist in the world operates. If you go to the Washington Post right now, if you go to the New York Times right now, there is a section about how to leak to them securely with using end-to-end encryption. So it's not like mainstream outlets don't function this way. They do. It's not like mainstream journalists don't function this way. They all do. But Julian Assange, because of a decade-long smear campaign, is being held up as a bad guy or a Russian asset or a Trump fan, and no one talks about the material that is in the leaks. It's always a character assassination because they don't want you to know the 10 billion plus documents that are in WikiLeaks that anyone can go to right now and search up.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate. Yeah, it's So I guess maybe with election and COVID and things, they're just trying to like threaten people and journalists to just stay in line and cooked up some new charges. And so is there anything to what's the best way that people can help Assange right now?
There's a number of ways of doing that. If you're in the U.S., you can pressure both sitting members of Congress and journalists to talk about this. There are not enough independent content creators who speak regularly about Julian Assange. So thank you for inviting me and for having me on. Um, because the problem is when you train your audience to only tune into like the US political horse race, then that audience tunes out when you start talking about a different subject. Um, Julian Assange has, like, again, just been smeared mercilessly for the better part of a decade. So pressure your favorite content creators to speak out about Julian Assange. You can help that way. You can educate yourselves, and you can start sharing what you learn. And there are a number of ways to do that.
Okay.
The defendwikileaks.org
Okay.
is a fantastic website. There's links to donate to Julian's defense fund there. The vigils that we hold twice weekly, um, which you can find at the number 4 Assange on YouTube, and the Rockfin and DLive and Periscope, Cup Twitch. I think the vigils are on as well. We have interviews with independent journalists, with Assange supporters, with people inside the WikiLeaks inner circle, and are trying to proliferate as much accurate information as humanly possible about this. We have teach-in videos that we're releasing right now that are done like mini documentary style, 13 to 20 minutes, with as much information as we can cram into that as humanly possible. We are going back to Washington, D.C. in September. We were specifically asked to not use the language of the empire, so we are not calling it an extradition hearing anymore. Julian Assange isn't a U.S. citizen. He can't be extradited here. What he can be is black bagged or renditioned or kidnapped, and that's essentially what is happening. So starting September 7th, Action for Assange, in conjunction with Veterans for Peace, Code Pink, Popular Resistance, and a number of other established and wonderful activist organizations, will be holding 3 weeks of demonstrations and events, teach-ins, panels. We've got everyone from former CIA analyst and now head of VIPS, Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, Ray McGovern, on board, to Kevin Gostola, Elizabeth Voss. A number of other independent journalists are going to come in and help be a part of this panel.
I would love to cover that. I would love to cover that event.
Where are you located?
I'm in
like
New York
roughly.
City. I'm in New York City.
You're what?
New York City.
You're in NYC?
Yeah.
You're fucking invited, man. And I can put you in touch with the NYC for Assange people too. Our good friend Deha has been kicking ass over there.
I'd like to be part of the. I'm gonna help out too. Yeah, I want to help out too. This is something that needs, that needs to be addressed
awesome.
here.
Make sure that you get a hold of me after this, and I can put you in touch with those guys. And I can give you the link to the A4A Discord too, because that's where we do a lot of our planning.
Sure.
Well, the broad strokes planning. We do the real planning on encrypted platforms like Wire or Jitsi or 8x8.
Okay. I'd like to ask another question, because honestly, I've tried to push like the Assange thing in some other groups that I'm part of. Yeah, just like being a fan of it. And the thing is that for some reason, I'm not sure why, but it seems like Bernie Sanders, right, who's probably the most popular populist, politician right now, has never really come out publicly in support of Assange the way that we would like to maybe see. What do you think is really stopping that?
Bernie Sanders is stopping that. Bernie Sanders has always had a cozy relationship with the national security state. He's never been one of, and I look, man, I have a lot of friends who were all in for Bernie Sanders, and when I would ask them this, I would get like almost an excuse generator,
Yeah, or they would
right?
just be like, or they don't know why, but then because Bernie doesn't do it, they themselves don't really get involved as much as they honestly could and probably should, you know?
And this goes right back to what I was saying about independent media, where and it's the same thing with your pet politician. If your pet politician isn't giving you the things that you need to care about, you're not going to care about the things that aren't being discussed. And it's a big deal, a big part of why what Action for Assange stresses is that this is a post partisan movement. And by post partisan, I mean we don't have a political ideology that we subscribe to or push. We believe that you can't have a political conversation without access to untampered information.
That's true.
So let's get that part done right, and then we can talk about policy because we'll have a more complete picture of our government. We'll have a more complete picture of the corporations that lobby our government, and then we can honestly and openly, with all available information, discuss policy. But Bernie Sanders has no love for Julian Assange, and he should.
That's been disappointing,
He
yeah.
should. But his role is DNC's sheepdog. His role is to make sure that millions of young people vote inside a party that has never and will never support them.
That's the
And
only
that's a
thing that I
hard
could
lesson.
think of holding him back. Like maybe the DNC told him not to support Assange. That's the only reason why I could think why he would not do something like that.
I mean, of
Or yeah,
course they did, but he's the DNC outreach coordinator, for
yeah.
fuck's sake. He's doing this because he's comfortable where he's at. He loves those committee appointments, and he likes being able to, bask in the glory of his career as the people know it, not as his career actually stands.
Oh well, that's pretty sad. Well, hopefully, yeah, hopefully we could get them on board because honestly, there's a lot of Bernie people out there. They're a huge force in the streets out here. So,
Yeah.
I was actually a Tulsi supporter, but I'm not against it. I mean, I think we all have to find ways to. We need to build a coalition from all the different groups right now involved with MPP, Movement for People's Party, and I will be suggesting to them that we support this Assange maneuver and see what we can do about that. Yeah.
I know a number of people that have lobbied Nick and Carolyn like personally to
Okay.
do that, and
And what happens?
they back off. Look, man, in 2015, myself and Eric Helblas launched the Progressive Independent Party,
Yeah.
and a lot of what we did was absorbed by MPP, not necessarily with our consent, but absorbed by MPP. So you'll get a semblance of what the platform of the Progressive Independent Party was if you look at MPPs.
Well, I'll tell you right now
But
that the elements of all the groups, right, the Yang, the Bernie, there's all like significant portions of those populations that do support this Assange thing, even if the leadership doesn't, even if the leadership does and stays silent for some weird reason, who knows why, right? There are people in those groups that do, that do support Assange and what he stands for.
yeah, and now's the time, man. There are I, less
Yeah,
than 75 days
I'm down, bro. I'm
until
with you, man. I'm with you.
uh,
Yeah,
and I'm speaking to your audience here too. Like now is the time. Like if you've been confused about it or you haven't understood exactly the implications of this, let me break it down here real quick. The First Amendment is at stake. Investigative journalism is at stake. The way that news is reported completely is at stake, because if Julian Assange is allowed to be renditioned to the United States, he faces 175 years for doing journalism. This is going to set the legal precedent that any government can go after any journalist or any publisher if they print things that are embarrassing to that government. So no matter where you live and no matter what content creator you stand, their heads are on the chopping block.
yeah, that's very disturbing. It's not cool at all.
I know, man. It We tried to make it a campaign issue with a number of candidates, and Tulsi Gabbard did go on record in support of, saying that Assange deserved a pardon, Chelsea Manning deserved a pardon, Edward Snowden deserved a pardon. In this superseding indictment, the people who helped Edward Snowden evade capture are included as persons of interest and people that the U.S. government would like to prosecute. Sarah Harrison had to change her entire life because of the role that she played in that. She's a goddamn hero, and if you don't know who she is, you should look her up.
Have you seen the documentary on Jeff Epstein about how they
the one on Netflix?
Yeah, about how they pardon everybody, like right with Assange. Everybody who's even touching him is guilty and can be investigated. But for Epstein, anybody associated with him is free, gets a jail out of free card. It's like a reverse.
And they're trying to go in this indictment. They're trying to go after Anonymous. Anonymous is a decentralized movement with no leaders. And let me, if you are for privacy in the digital space and transparency for the powerful, you are anonymous. You are. I am. So that what they're doing is saying any advocate of digital privacy is now subject to prosecution. Just like in the 2020 NDAA, it says that hacktivists, leaktivists, and public disclosure outlets are now terrorists. So dig that for a second, because if your channel is publicly disclosing breaking information, your head's on the chopping block. If your audience is retweeting what you're saying and you are breaking news, they're on the chopping block. They're trying to kill encryption. They are trying to kill what's left of digital privacy, and they are trying to kill investigative journalism. And that is something that impacts every single person on this planet. So every single person on this planet has a duty and an obligation to stand up to stop this.
I think it actually goes maybe even beyond journalism, because the thing is that when we buy our foods, we're not even allowed to know if it's GMO or not, right?
Oh, yeah.
When we buy, so or even in the industry, like the meat industry, they don't allow people to take pictures on factory farms, right? Versus in Europe, where they actually, they actually make live feeds so people can see that everything's going, according to plan. You know what I mean? Yeah.
No, and the ag-gag laws are completely nefarious. They've been on the books for a very long time. And you're right, there's more transparency of that in the EU countries and even in Russia. Russia, who's been, who we've been told is this tyrannical, monolithic, hateful, all seeing, all terrifying country, they kicked Monsanto out of their country. We love Monsanto. And I'm really glad that some of the lawsuits against Monsanto have gone through and people have got paid off of that. But Monsanto is still allowed to thrive in this country. And you're right, it does go beyond all of it. The ability to get on your computer and access primary source documentation is a fundamental digital right. And I think it's about goddamn time that we had a digital Bill of Rights in this country. And number one would be the protection of outlets like WikiLeaks, because they're the people who have gone above and beyond with making sure that information the public has a right to know is in the eyes and ears of the public.
That's what I'm talking about. That sounds great, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool, man. So it was really nice to meet you, man. Where are you from?
I am originally from the middle of Indiana in a town called Anderson that Chris Hedges writes about in America, the Farewell Tour. And for about the last 20 years, I've been living in Northern California in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Cool. You're gonna be here for the New York City event?
Which New York City event?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say there was something going on here in New York City? You said you're gonna put me in touch with some people?
There's an NYC Free Assange chapter, and actually at the beginning of August, my co-host on the Free Assange Vigils and I are trying to put together a live teach-in. So we would be flying out and driving out and doing what we do in front of a live audience. So we would really like for people in the NYC area to be a part of that.
Where's that going to be? Do you guys know where you guys going to book that
We
show?
don't have a venue yet. The idea was we've just been talking with one of the NYC Free Assange organizers.
Okay.
Our buddy Deha.
You could do Las Vegas. That's easy to get to. You could do Chicago. That's in the central of the country. Or you could do California, New York. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, that was the plan. That was the plan before COVID, was to start doing these in March.
Yeah.
I actually had a venue, locked down, and I was going to go up to Portland and do a live teach-in. Because our graphics person and our tech person also live on the West Coast, so they were going to come with me. And then lockdown happened, and we weren't able to do those. But now that lockdown's being lifted a little bit, in the month of August, we're looking to do anywhere from like 4 to 7 of these.
Hey,
live.
You know what's a cool idea? So the thing is that my show, right? I'm going to actually try to be also broadcasting it on cable access. So the thing is that, right, like you have some connects over here in New York, right? You could have your show air not only there in Santa Cruz, right, but also maybe in Los Angeles. I know some people over there too, and maybe also air in New York. And we can try to like find other like activists across the country, and and find a way to like make our footage, right, get aired in a nationwide network. You get what I mean?
That would be killer.
To also like to help our YouTubes and our BitChutes as well. Because we know YouTube be throttling, so I'm on BitChute and Daily Motion as well. You're probably the same thing, yeah? Oh, you're already on D-Live, man. And Rockfin, you're big time. They turned me down. I'm not mad at them, yeah? I'm too small, man. That's all right, though. That's I'm already.
I got it. Look, man, I got to give a lot of credit to Nico House and Tarek Haddad, both of whom went to bat for me to get me on Rockfin, because my YouTube channel is suppressed as fuck. And like for every 100, 150 people I see subscribe to the channel, YouTube lets me keep maybe 1 or 2. So, I do. I owe Nico and Tarek a debt of gratitude and my personal thanks.
Awesome.
For helping me get over there.
Hey, thanks, dude. This was one of the coolest interviews I've done yet, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Kick ass. Thank you.
These videos are independently produced and funded, and your support is deeply appreciated. Liking the video and subscribing helps the channel, and ringing the bell icon will keep you notified as to when we upload new content. You can also check out our other social media platforms. We'd love to hear from you. We also have our event calendar, links in the description. On our Reddit, you can come in and get on the conversation and check out some of the memes. Like and share, it really helps us in the YouTube algorithm. Every week on Sunday, we have a live online meeting where you can join us in working to create and nurture the change that we need. I'd like to invite you to check out some of our other videos. Until next time, may all your actions bring you success. Stay focused, stay strong, and reinvest in yourself as well as your community. Together, our efforts can be greater than the sum of the parts. The power is in your hands. Thanks for watching.